Hey, what's going on, you guys? My name is the Raptor, and once again I have decided to take a look at my subscribers' favorite matchups and give my basic opinions on them. If you're new, these matchups come from my Who Would Win polls on the community section of my channel, as they are dictated by what gets the most likes in the comments of those polls, and therefore are what are most supported, generally speaking. You can partake in those if you're not doing so already to contribute to what these videos could look like, but before that, let's look at the next set of matchups from where we left off last time. So first up, we have Perry the Platypus versus Skipper, Phineas and Ferb versus Madagascar and Penguins of Madagascar. This is surprisingly the matchup that I've probably talked about the most over the last few months, and here we are, I'm talking about it again through basically sheer luck. This is one of my favorite cartoon matchups. It should be no surprise at this point. There are definitely some that are better and definitely some that I'd like to see more, but this one speaks to me too. It kind of gives me Stitch versus Rocket vibes, although obviously not nearly to the same degree. I love these characters' similar roles within their worlds. They are not the main characters of their original media, but they still have basically as much impact on the story as the main characters, and they steal the show every time they're on screen. Like, I think that's such a fun connection, and that combined with their general gimmicks makes for a really great tone and a really unique set of connections, in my opinion at least. This would also be a cool episode to show how different cartoons treat their physics, because these characters do come from very different cartoons, and it's about time we recognize that not all Toon Force is created equal. Not every cartoon battle is going to end in a draw, you know, that kind of thing. Plus, these characters have pretty crazy arsenals and skills, which would also be fun to analyze and see in a fight. I have no idea what the likeliness looks like for this episode actually happening, but you know, a man can dream, and it does work unironically either way. I will still hold to it. It does work as a hypothetical death battle. On a strangely similar note, we move on to Spider-Ham versus Rabbid Mario, Marvel's Spider-Man versus Mario and Rabbid's Kingdom battle. This matchup was basically not on my radar at all before I started these Who Would Win polls, and now that I've heard it, I don't think I'll ever be able to forget it. This is such a wacky idea. Like, I can say that the debate itself wouldn't be that predictable, at least on the surface level, because these characters have so much craziness surrounding them. I do think it would bring a fun dynamic, and it's a twist with very popular characters and IPs like Marvel's Spider-Man and Nintendo's Mario. Like, I think that in and of itself is pretty interesting. It is kind of random though. Like, it's never one that I'd have at the top of my most wanted death battles list, and I don't know if it'd be at the top of death battles list for actual production either. Like, I know they like using Marvel and DC a lot, but I don't know if this is the kind of matchup that they would default to or would think about doing sooner rather than later. It's difficult to say. Who knows? Maybe they would hear the matchup and they really like it, but I don't know. It seems kind of random to me. Another thing I do want to point out is that it would take the place of the quote weird episode or WTF matchup of the season. It seems like there's like one every season, but we typically don't get more than one every season, so I feel like that could also push it lower on the priority list. Like, there are other WTF matchups that are probably a lot more popular that Death Battle would want to prioritize more than this one, you know? But I'm not trying to put down this matchup or anything. I do think it could be a lot of fun. If Death Battle were to do it, I certainly wouldn't complain. I'd really like to see how they handle it. It's not something that is widely wanted, but it should be something that anyone could enjoy. Like, if anyone's looking at this matchup and thinking, this matchup can't happen, it's too silly, like, this can't be on Death Battle, like, watch Death Battle to have fun, please. You know, like, it's something everyone should be able to enjoy if you allow yourself to enjoy it. I think it'd be fun. Next up, Hiccup and Toothless versus Hiro and Baymax, How to Train Your Dragon versus Big Hero 6. I absolutely love this idea. I feel like, again, most people kind of already know this. It made it to my top 10 most wanted death battles after season 10 finished. I made a long form trailer for it because I got even more interested in it more recently. I just love it for personal reasons and for general reasons. I like to think that even if I didn't love these characters and these franchises as much as I do, I would still be able to appreciate this matchup for what it has going for it, because man, I think it has a lot going for it. I absolutely love the balance of connections and contrasts between these two pairs. I think it does it perfectly and makes for a really interesting idea. I love the themes that come with these characters and their franchises. There is such a strong emotional center, like all 2v2 fights should have. I love everything about this matchup except for one thing, and that one thing is that putting Baymax in a fight to the death situation feels kind of wrong. Like, it doesn't feel like that's where he should be. And to me, it's more than just a character is pacifistic and doesn't want to kill people. Like, this is literally programming that Baymax usually has that says that he can't. And, I feel like this is something that could hold him back. I think back to Agent Texas in the Red versus Blue fight. It is something that Death Battle would have to figure out. Like, if worse comes to worse, they could just say that Hiro would have to deal the killing blows. They could say that Hiro could remove the healthcare chip just for this one instance, which would be very unideal, but I would understand if they went that route. Again, they say that Baymax can't harm a human being, but does that mean he could technically kill Toothless, but not Hiccup? It's hard. Death Battle would have to look into it a little more, but I'm sure they could make something work. It would just be a little tough. And relevance might also be an issue because these characters and their franchises are basically finished now, but they have used characters like that before, so if they really wanted to make this idea, I don't think it would be a huge problem. But yeah, overall, I think this could be a well choreographed and entertaining episode, again with such a strong emotional center. This is one of those battles where it's more about seeing some of my favorite characters on my favorite show more than it is anything else. So if this episode were to happen, regardless of how they handled it, I would be so hyped to see it. After that, the most upvoted matchup was Randy Cunningham versus Ladybug, the 9th grade ninja versus the Miraculous. This one's a bit weird for me to talk about just because I have some history with Spider-Man versus Ladybug. I don't like that matchup as much as I used to, more so I'm just kind of lukewarm on it now. I do still hold to it that Ladybug took more inspiration from Spider-Man than anyone else, however that doesn't necessarily mean that it's the best matchup. Some people might argue that it makes it a worse matchup actually, but either way, regardless of all that, I still quite like the concept of Randy versus Ladybug. To be fair, I really like matchups with younger characters because they're kind of pre-packaged with personality. Like, I think back to Miles Morales versus Static, which is a matchup where I think Death Battle really utilized the personalities well, and it made for a really good episode. I still really enjoy that episode to this day. And I think back to other matchups like Danny Phantom versus Jake Long, a hypothetical Rex Salazar versus Max Steel, etc., etc. Like, these are matchups where I think if the personality is done right, then it could be a fun experience and a genuinely good episode. And I think this matchup also falls into that category. This is also a matchup where, as far as I'm understanding, not one character holds all of the advantages. Like, Randy Cunningham has some great physical capabilities, obviously, while Ladybug picked up some insane abilities as the show went on. There's at least definitely a lot to talk about, a lot to discuss before we come to a conclusion, which I think is really cool because in a landscape where it seems like there are so many matchups where one character definitively holds all the advantages over the other character, like, this is really refreshing to me. I really enjoy that. I'm not too familiar with either show anymore, particularly Randy Cunningham 9th grade ninja, just as I've gotten older, but I would still be down for this. This is probably Randy's best matchup, and it might be Ladybug's best matchup too, so I don't really have anything to complain about. I think it would be cool. After that, we get to Puss in Boots versus Buck Wild, Shrek versus Ice Age. This is another one that's pretty interesting to talk about, but in this case, it's because Puss actually has a pretty decent matchup spread, all things considered, and it's hard to talk about one of his matchups without bringing up the other ones on top of that. If I really had to bring up one opponent that I would say is my preferred for Puss, I would probably say Mau Mau, although to be honest, I'm not that picky here, and I recognize that he can work really well with some of his other opponents. I don't like Zoro versus Puss because that's really just original versus parody, which does not appeal to me. Polnareff doesn't really click for me as Puss's #1 best either, but maybe it does for you, and if so, that's cool, I guess. To me, Lego Batman and Buck Wild are both good for roles within stories, when trying to compare it to Puss. I do think Lego Batman actually goes a little further in terms of specific character development, which we can see in their individual movies, like The Last Wish and the Lego Batman movie. However, despite all of that, I actually like Puss versus Buck's vibe a little more. It's hard to explain, but sometimes it kind of just works out like that, Like, these two characters feel very comparable. It feels right to put them in a matchup against each other. It might be my preferred alt for Puss, to be honest. But yeah, I just like that these characters have such a love for combat and such a love for adventure. Some of their accomplishments are monumental, and that's to be taken literally. Like, some of their opponents are either huge in size or huge in scale, like overall scale, who they are. Either way, it's just huge, and I think that's great for characters like these, series, you know? And I think all of that could be really well integrated into the animation and the analyses. Like, they could be boasting about how great they are while they're fighting, like listing off all the cool things they've done. In the analyses, hell, Wiz and Boomstick could just be hyping them up the entire time. That'd be really fitting for these characters, and I would eat that up too. But yeah, this is another matchup that's more about the fun than it is about going through a checklist and saying, does it work in this way, does it work in this way, etc. It is more about the fun. And it's not as big of a movie fight as something like Hiccup and Toothless versus Hiro and Baymax, but I still think it has good elements. If Puss were to fight someone else, it might depend on who he fights, but I think this is a really safe option for him. I think it'd be really fun. After that, we have Chaos versus Kyogre, Sonic versus Pokemon. This is a matchup that kind of reminds me of Kratos versus Asura in that every time I see people talking about this matchup, they talk about how great it is. They absolutely love it, and they really, really want to see it. I want to see this matchup too. I like it, but I don't think I love it as much as everyone else does, which is actually a bit weird because I really like Sonic the Hedgehog as a franchise, and I like Pokemon just fine too. It's not my favorite matchup by any means, but it does have a cool and unique enough concept to stand out in whatever season you put it in. Honestly, Sonic vs. Pokemon does work for a few matchups, and I don't know if this is an unpopular opinion or anything, but Mewtwo vs. Shadow as a hypothetical matchup idea actually is really, really cool. I really like that idea. Granted, I am a little biased towards experiment matchups for obvious reasons, but even still, I like that idea a lot, and there are definitely some Sonic vs. Pokemon matchups where the combatants play off of each other very well, and this definitely falls into that category. I know the crew is interested, although they have also said that water can be hard to animate. I know they were talking about it for Percy Jackson matchups, so it might depend on how creative they need to get with this, and there may be some ideas that are very popular or have Sonic or Pokemon characters that don't have such a drawback, so maybe they'd be higher on the priority list, although obviously we don't know for sure. I get the appeal of this idea. It also seems somewhat debatable too. I've seen people argue on either side, and I would still be very intrigued if this happened. I will not deny that. Moving on, Ainz Ooal Gown, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, versus Rimuru Tempest. Overlord versus that time I got reincarnated as a slime. What a title. Now, I gotta be honest for a second, I don't know how much I can actually talk about this matchup. Generally speaking, anime can be a bit of a blind spot for me. I can't say that I know all of the manga titles that exist, especially some of the lesser known ones, and these series aren't even that lesser known, so that just goes to show my point, you know? But yeah, I don't know that much about the characters or the series in this case. I've seen other opponents suggested for each of them, especially Rimuru, although obviously this matchup has enough of a following, it got enough likes to be in this video, and it doesn't really seem like the closest matchup either. I've seen a lot of people just say that Rimuru takes it easy, and maybe that's true, but that's just what I've heard, so I thought I would share it here. But yeah, I think this matchup has a cool vibe either way regarding the debate. I definitely would love to learn more about the content of the series, kind of like how I went into Killua versus Misaka or Gojo versus Makima. That was the stuff that attracted me most to those episodes, just knowing that I would learn something new, and that would definitely apply here too. But yeah, I can't really say much about the specific dynamic or anything. I know that this series is supposed to allow me to talk about more matchups that I wouldn't normally talk about on my own, but it goes to show that naturally I would get a matchup that I can't really say much about just because I'm not knowledgeable enough about it. So yeah, sorry about that, but those are my thoughts. And finally, to end off the video, we have Naruto Uzumaki versus Monkey D. Luffy, Naruto versus One Piece. Let's see how quickly I can get through this one. I understand the annoyance at this matchup, okay? I get that there are some people that really don't understand how this has become so popular. It's not great when it comes to strict comparison metrics. However, I do also think that this matchup is not bad whatsoever. The connections that are there work really well, especially when it comes to shonen protagonists, and it is just a really big legacy matchup in the anime community that people are going to get invested in. So by that logic, I understand why there are a lot of people that like it, and I am quite interested in it too. I'm interested in hearing what Death Battle has to say about it, even though there might be a lot of people that disagree with everything they say. But I'm gonna say something that probably not a lot of people are going to agree with me on, but there are some legacy matchups that exist that are strong enough to justify not amazing connections or such. I definitely stand by that stance. I have stood by it for quite a while now, and I think this matchup falls into that camp. This is a simple matchup that has fun fun characters, super modes, and cool-ass anime bullshit. There is not much more to it than that, and the toxicity would be through the roof, but it could be an amazing and enjoyable production. You cannot deny that. Whether you're a lover or a hater of this matchup, it could be a really, really well-made episode for sure. It would be better if each of these guys had an undeniably great opponent. Some people would argue that they do, but I don't know, I don't really see it that way. So just slapping them together, having them fight in a good old anime battle, I think that is just fine. And that is where things are going to leave off today. If you want to see more like this, you can check out the previous episodes, and once again visit my community tab to check out the polls that determine what goes into these videos. If these videos do well enough, I can make them whenever there's an opening in my schedule, or just whenever I feel like it. But either way, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a great day, and peace out.